following is a feature presentation of the Replay Sports Channel, the home for great games. This telecast is copyrighted by the WFL for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this telecast or any pictures, descriptions, or accounts of the game without the WFL's consent is prohibited.
Welcome to another deep dive. Imagine for a second stepping inside a deep-sea submarine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like you can study the blueprints all day long, run all these computer simulations, and look at the engineering specs to see exactly how much pressure that titanium hull is supposed to withstand.
Right. But that's all theoretical.
Exactly. It's totally theoretical because when you actually descend thousands of feet into the ocean, millions of gallons of water are actively trying to find like the tiniest microscopic fissure around a single rivet.
Wow, yeah.
And a flaw that was completely invisible on the surface suddenly becomes a catastrophic failure under the crush of the deep.
That is a perfect analogy because that structural reality, it applies perfectly to human ecosystems too, especially in really high-stakes environments.
Oh, for sure.
We build these complex organizations, whether they're corporate teams or professional sports franchises, and we just assume the foundation is rock solid. We look at the talent on paper and think they're basically impervious.
Right, because the blueprints look good.
Exactly. But the blueprints don't account for the psychological weight of a ticking clock.
And that brings us directly to the massive stack of notes you shared with us today. You sent over this incredibly detailed breakdown of Week 14 of the 2025 WFL football season.
Dated December 7th, 2025.
Right, December 7th. And our mission for this deep dive is to, really cut through the noise of the standard scoreboard reading. We are taking your notes and extracting the real mechanisms of pressure, execution, and strategy here.
Because Week 14 in professional football is the ultimate pressure cooker.
It really is. It's the time of year when those microscopic fissures in a team's foundation either hold up or they completely shatter.
Yeah, and reading a box score, it only tells us what happened, not why it happened. Your notes provide this real-time study in crisis management and high-stakes decision-making.
Totally.
So over the course of this deep dive, we're going to explore the underlying anatomy of late-game heroics, the hidden tactical value of defensive pressure.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll get into the structural tragedy of wasted individual brilliance, and finally, how all of these micro moments violently reshape the macro playoff picture.
Yeah.
Because the standings right now are dictated entirely by who can survive that crushing depth of December.
So let's start at the very bottom of the ocean, the fourth quarter. Nothing exposes a team's true character quite like a deficit with the clock running out.
Oh, absolutely nothing.
In the notes you provided, the Baltimore Stallions matchup against the Birmingham Americans just completely jumps off the page. Late in the third quarter, Birmingham's quarterback Bo Nix hits Jamar Chase for a 14-yard touchdown.
Great.
It's 30-14. Birmingham has completely dominated the line of scrimmage, piling up like 209 rushing yards. By all conventional logic, Baltimore's hull should have imploded right there.
The game script was entirely in Birmingham's favor at that point. I mean, when a team is up by 2 scores and just gashing the opponent on the ground, the statistical probability of a comeback just plummets.
Right, the defense usually just goes crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Defensive coordinators usually pin their ears back, send the pass rush, and force the trailing quarterback into a fatal mistake.
See, that is the part that trips me up, though. If you are Matthew Stafford and your team is getting mauled in the trenches, the natural instinct is to panic.
100%.
You want to start chucking the ball deep to get those 16 points back immediately. How on earth did Stafford throw for 279 yards and orchestrate this masterclass without the Birmingham defense just teeing off on him?
Well, Stafford engineered that comeback by fundamentally rejecting the panic. He simplified the variables.
I mean,
So when Birmingham took that 30-14 lead, Their defensive psychology shifted. They went into a shell, basically playing soft zone coverages to prevent the quick, deep touchdown. They just wanted to bleed the clock.
Ah, playing not to lose.
Exactly. And instead of forcing deep shots into double coverage, Stafford essentially said, well, I will gladly take the 5 underneath yards you're conceding. He leaned incredibly hard on the ground game and short checkdowns to Saquon Barkley.
Who, by the way, ground out 97 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Right. And Stafford just methodically fed his MVP target, Greg Dortch, in the soft spots of the zone.
So they basically used Birmingham's defensive preservation strategy against them. That totally explains how Baltimore converted 7 of 15 third downs and held the ball for over 34 minutes.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Stafford didn't try to score 16 points on a single play. He just chipped away at the foundation until Birmingham's defense was physically exhausted. And it all culminated with Stafford hitting Dortch for a 22-yard touchdown late, and then rookie kicker Joshua Carty drilling a 59-yard field goal at the buzzer.
It was forced overtime, yeah.
Right, and they ultimately won 33-30.
And, notice the contrast in sideline energy you highlighted in your research. As Baltimore methodically chipped away, the Birmingham sideline just tightened up.
You could feel it.
Yeah, the pressure transfer.
Yeah.
Birmingham's defense was on the field way too long. The pass rush lost its legs. And by the time overtime hit, Baltimore had entirely rewritten the psychological momentum.
So Baltimore proved that patience beats panic. But what happens when the opponent's offense isn't just sitting on a lead, but they're actively trading punches with you in the fourth quarter?
That's a totally different beast.
Right. And we saw this exact scenario play out with Baker Mayfield and the Chicago Fire. Mayfield won game MVP by engineering 2 massive fourth-quarter drives to lift Chicago past the Denver Gold 25-19.
And Denver was not backing down.
Not at all. Denver had Derrick Henry playing like an absolute monster. I mean, he racked up 130 rushing yards and ripped off a 30-yard touchdown run with less than 5 minutes left to take the lead. Denver didn't go into a shell. They tried to run Chicago over.
They really did.
Yeah.
But Mayfield matched Denver's physicality with tactical rushing. Instead of abandoning the run game because they were trailing late, Chicago utilized Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery to control the tempo.
Which is so counterintuitive when you're down.
It is, but it worked. The team rushed for 183 yards. Mayfield himself took off for 67 rushing yards. And the key here is when the defensive ends crashed down to stop Gibbs, Mayfield pulled the ball and scrambled.
Oh, smart.
Yeah, but he scrambled, not out of desperation, but to keep the chains moving and keep Derrick Henry frozen on the sideline.
Okay, unpacking this, it's like watching a master procrastinator ace a final exam. They are completely unfazed by the ticking clock. Mayfield just lets Jahmyr Gibbs punch it in from 10 yards out with just 24 seconds left.
Incredible composure.
And you see a similar methodical survival instinct with the Las Vegas Outlaws. You noted in your research that St. Louis's Rhamondre Stevenson went off for 149 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns.
Earning Player of the Week honors, actually.
Yeah, well deserved. And St. Louis put together this massive 14-play, 8-minute drive in the fourth quarter to pull within 3 points. But Jalen Hurts and Las Vegas didn't break. Their defense stepped up, forced consecutive punts, and secured a game-ending interception to win 23-20.
Well, Las Vegas survived because their defense didn't just bend, it violently snapped back into place. They absorbed that 8-minute, 14-play body blow from St. Louis without giving up the fatal touchdown in the red zone.
Yeah.
And that completely flips our perspective on how games are won in December. We've been discussing offenses methodically surviving pressure, but when a defense is truly elite, they don't just withstand the pressure, they weaponize it.
They turn it around on them.
Exactly. They create absolute tsunamis that drown the opposing offense.
Okay, let's follow that thread into the defensive tsunamis you documented for Week 14. There is no better example of a defense weaponizing pressure than the New Jersey Hitmen.
Oh, man. What a game.
They put on an absolute turnover clinic against the Atlanta Legends, winning 31-10. Atlanta's Joe Burrow threw 3 interceptions.
Uncharacteristic for him.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And the absolute knockout punch was an 86-yard fumble return for a touchdown by New Jersey cornerback Tyreek Stevenson in the fourth quarter. And it was wild because New Jersey had 109 penalty yards in this game.
Which is usually a death sentence. A team committing over 100 penalty yards is demonstrating a fundamental lack of discipline. Typically, that structural flaw destroys your chances of winning.
Right.
But New Jersey's defense generated such a high volume of chaotic pressure that it entirely, mathematically, erased their own sloppy play. Think about the mechanics of that 86-yard return.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just a sudden change of possession.
It's a massive point swing.
It is a 13-point swing.
Yeah.
It rips the soul out of an offense that thought it was about to score.
Okay, here is where I have to push back on the narrative of defensive brilliance, though. Because looking at the raw data you provided, Atlanta actually outrushed New Jersey 150-111 with Breece Hall leading the way.
Sure.
And over in the Pittsburgh game, Patrick Mahomes threw for 271 yards and 3 touchdowns, even though the San Diego Fleet sacked him 7 times and won 29-24. Philadelphia beat San Antonio 27-13 by sacking Jordan Love 5 times, completely stalling their drives.
Yeah.
So are these defensive coordinators actually executing master stroke strategies, or are guys like Burrow and Love just forcing terrible throws because they're staring down the playoff standings and feeling the existential dread of their season slipping away?
Well, the existential dread absolutely plays a role. I mean, desperation accelerates the decision-making process, which naturally breeds mistakes.
Sure.
However, those mistakes still have to be actively forced by the defensive scheme. If we connect this to the bigger picture, turnovers and sacks are not just bad luck for an offense. They are attacks levied by disciplined defenses that expertly disguise their coverages.
Attacks. I like that.
Yeah, consider how a simulated pressure works. A defense lines up 6 players on the line of scrimmage, showing a massive blitz. At the snap, 3 of them drop backward into throwing lanes, while a defensive back blitzes from a blind spot.
Total chaos.
Exactly. The quarterback's internal timer panics. He throws to a spot he thought would be empty, only to find a linebacker waiting there.
So the defense is essentially hacking the quarterback's brain. They are giving him a false blueprint of where the pressure is coming from.
Precisely.
That totally explains how the Arizona Rattlers completely suffocated the Cleveland Gladiators 36-10. They blitzed relentlessly, limited Cleveland to just 43 rushing yards, and forced 3 turnovers.
It's suffocating.
It is.
Yeah.
If you dominate the stat sheet between the 20-yard lines like Atlanta did with their rushing attack, it feels like you are controlling the game. But that turnover tax mathematically bankrupts your win probability.
New Jersey's head coach, Aaron Glenn, actually captured this dynamic perfectly. He said they knew if they just kept creating chaotic opportunities, eventually the opposing offense would break. The defense applies the pressure, the quarterback's internal clock speeds up, the fundamental mechanics of the footwork break down.
Boom, interception.
Exactly. That is when the forced throw happens. The tax comes due, regardless of how well you ran the ball in the first quarter.
That structural collapse of an offense is fascinating. But occasionally you encounter a scenario where an individual player completely transcends that collapsing pocket.
Oh, the superhero effort.
Yeah. The offensive line is crumbling, the running game is non-existent, the defense knows a pass is coming, and yet a single superstar decides to completely break the game. However, your notes reveal a darker side to this phenomenon. Pure individual firepower is rarely enough to save a sinking ship.
It really isn't. The narrative of the isolated superstar is one of the most pervasive myths in team sports. We desperately want to believe that one transcendent talent can elevate an entire structurally flawed organization.
Like it's a movie.
Right. But Week 14 provides the perfect laboratory to test that hypothesis.
Well, we can start with a scenario where the individual brilliance was actually supported. The Arizona connection between Aaron Rodgers and Trey McBride. Rodgers threw for 371 yards, but the real anomaly is McBride.
His numbers were insane.
Completely absurd. 14 catches, 226 yards, and 2 touchdowns against Cleveland. He earned Player of the Week honors because Cleveland literally had no schematic answer for him in the middle of the field.
Cleveland tried matching him with linebackers who were too slow and then with safeties who were too small. McBride was just an unsolvable physical mismatch. But we have to look at the ecosystem surrounding that performance.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, why did Rodgers have the time to find McBride 14 times? Because Arizona established a functional running game with Bijan Robinson adding 79 yards, and their defense kept giving them the ball back. Arizona controlled the clock for nearly 36 minutes.
Ah, so the foundation was there.
Exactly. The individual brilliance was merely the tip of a very solid spear.
Okay, but contrast that functional ecosystem with the tragic brilliance we saw from the Tampa Bay Bandits and the Pittsburgh Maulers. Tampa Bay's Will Levis threw for 370 yards. Terry McLaurin goes off for 194 receiving yards on 11 catches.
Monster numbers.
It's huge. And over in Pittsburgh, Mahomes throws for 271 yards and 3 touchdowns, mostly just feeding rookie Marvin Harrison Jr., who had 13 catches for 129 yards and 2 scores. If you were just checking fantasy football scores, you assume these guys dominated.
Naturally.
Yet both of those teams lost.
They lost because those massive statistical performances are what we call empty calories.
Empty calories.
Yeah. When a team is trailing by multiple scores in the second half, the opposing defense intentionally gives up the deep boundaries in the middle of the field to protect the end zone. A quarterback can easily throw for 150 yards in the fourth quarter simply because the defense is trading yardage for time.
So what does this all mean? We see these astronomical stat lines from guys like McLaurin, but in the context of the game's architecture, they were practically meaningless. Tampa Bay lost 41-29 to the DC Defenders.
Right.
Will Levis threw those 370 yards, but he also threw 3 interceptions. Meanwhile, DC's C.J. Stroud managed the game beautifully with 324 passing yards, and Ja'Cory Williams punched in 3 short rushing touchdowns.
This raises an important question about roster construction and high-variance football. Tampa Bay's performance is the definition of high variance. You get the explosive 50-yard touchdown, immediately followed by a catastrophic turnover inside your own territory.
It's a roller coaster.
And high variance fails the consistency test required to win in December. When your foundation is constantly shifting between spectacular plays and terrible mistakes, the pressure eventually crushes you.
And the consequences of that structural failure for Tampa Bay were monumental. That loss to DC officially eliminated Tampa Bay, the defending champions, from the playoffs entirely.
Yeah, that's huge.
Your notes highlighted that this marks only the 10th time in league history a reigning champ won't even get the chance to defend their crown. It is a stunning collapse.
It really is. And the fall of the defending champions directly contrasts with how other franchises are managing to survive and advance with far less spectacular individual play. Consider the architecture of the ugly wins you documented with New York and Detroit.
Those games really challenge how we evaluate quarterback play. Bryce Young threw 3 interceptions for New York.
3
picks. Usually, turning the ball over 3 times is an automatic death sentence for a team, but Young still led the Generals past the Memphis Express 27-17. How is that mathematically possible?
Well, he leaned on his weapons and his defense.
Exactly. He leaned on Jalen Shakir's 135 receiving yards and, more importantly, the New York defense clamped down entirely in the red zone, forcing field goals instead of touchdowns.
And Detroit provides an even starker example. Jaden Daniels didn't put up eye-popping passing numbers. He used his legs and highly efficient short passes to help the Wheels grind out a 17-10 win over the Los Angeles Wildcats.
A real grinder of a game.
Yeah, Detroit recognized their win condition control the line of scrimmage. They rushed for 151 yards and held Los Angeles to just 43 rushing yards. And they achieved this even though LA had Dak Prescott returning from a weak 6-foot injury and throwing a 50-yard bomb to Wan'Dale Wilson.
But Detroit didn't panic when Prescott hit that deep shot. They just went back to their situational football foundation. It really forces us to completely rethink how we value star power. We are so conditioned to celebrate the astronomical stat lines from players like Mahomes and McLaurin, but right now, those stats are attached to losing eliminated teams.
Because star power is fundamentally a multiplier. It multiplies the baseline structural health of your team.
Okay, I like this.
If your baseline is solid, meaning your offensive line can block, your defense gets off the field on third down, and you don't commit unforced errors, a superstar multiplies that into a championship run.
Makes sense.
But if your baseline is 0 because of bad fundamentals or turning the ball over 5 times like Tampa Bay did, multiplying it by a superstar still leaves you with 0 wins. A 300-yard passing game is just empty calories if the ecosystem is rotten.
Empty calories. That perfectly bridges us to the macro view. All of these micro moments, the clutch field goals, the disguised blitzes that cause interceptions, the empty calorie stat lines, they all coalesce into the larger ecosystem of the league standings. As we zoom out to look at the final stretch of the season you outlined, the playoff race is incredibly tense.
It really is. The top of the standings reflect the teams that have maintained structural integrity all year. In the American Conference, you have New Jersey riding a 4-game win streak, tied with Chicago at 9-3.
Just rolling.
Yeah, they are dominating their divisions with methodical execution. Philadelphia is looking right behind them at 8-4, and in the National Conference, a 3-headed monster has emerged. San Diego, Las Vegas, and Birmingham are all sitting at the top, dictating the pace of the league.
But below those heavyweights, the bubble fight is pure, unadulterated chaos.
Complete chaos.
The mechanisms of survival we talked about earlier are being tested to their absolute limits. San Antonio lost to Philly, and Denver blew that late lead to Chicago. Because of the specific failures under pressure, San Antonio is now 5-7, but they are still just one single game behind Denver, who is 6-6, for the 6th and final national playoff spot.
It's so tight.
In the American Conference, Baltimore's miracle overtime win puts them at 7-5, applying massive pressure to St. Louis, who sits at 8-4.
And this bubble fight is no longer just about strategy. It has devolved into a war of physical attrition. Every single snap for these bubble teams carries the weight of their entire season, and their hulls are severely compromised.
The injuries are piling up.
Your notes detail a staggering injury toll. Cleveland lost Austin Eckler for 10 weeks. Denver lost Noah Fant and Tariq Woolen. Chicago lost George Pickens. New Jersey lost Von Miller. The psychological pressure of the fourth quarter is now bleeding into the training room all week long. Teams are literally running out of healthy bodies to execute their schemes.
And while those teams are fighting for their playoff lives, the draft race introduces a completely bizarre psychological dynamic to the standings. Pittsburgh is 2-10 after getting mauled by San Diego. Los Angeles is 2-10 after getting ground out by Detroit. And they play each other next Saturday night.
Oh, that game is going to be something.
Right. That specific matchup will directly determine who gets the #1 overall pick in the 2026 WFL draft. It is essentially a race to the bottom.
Your draft race completely inverts the standard incentive structure of competitive sports.
Yeah.
When you look at the standings, it resembles a massive corporate ladder.
Yes. Let's explore that analogy because it perfectly illustrates the weirdness of Week 14. You have the executives in New Jersey and San Diego fighting tooth and nail for the corner office. They are optimizing every single process.
Like the high performers.
Then you have the middle managers in Denver and San Antonio who are sweating through their shirts just trying to hit their quarterly quotas so they don't get fired.
Okay.
And at the very bottom, you have Pittsburgh and LA. They're basically hoping the company goes completely bankrupt so they can cash out on a massive insurance policy, which in this case is a transcendent, franchise-altering college prospect.
The corporate ladder analogy functions so well because it highlights how the organizational definition of success totally shifts depending on your record.
It completely flips.
Yeah, the stakes on the field are incredibly high. The players for Pittsburgh and LA are fighting for their professional livelihoods, fighting to get things on tape for their next contract. The coaching staffs are fighting to avoid being fired. But for the front office, organizational success next Saturday paradoxically demands losing the football game.
It's so weird to think that a general manager is quietly hoping his quarterback throws an interception in the fourth quarter next week. When you look at the entire landscape you provided in your notes, from the executives to the bankrupt franchises, Week 14 reveals a fundamental truth about operating in a high-stakes environment. Whether you are managing a massive corporate project, navigating a chaotic week in your personal life, or breaking down professional football, success under pressure is rarely about taking giant, desperate swings.
That's exactly it. The teams that survived Week 14 did so through methodical execution.
Yeah.
They didn't try to score 16 points on a single play. They checked the ball down. They established the run.
Right.
They disguised their blitzes to force unforced errors from their opponents. They simplified the variables and trusted their foundational blueprints when the hull of the submarine started groaning.
Exactly. You lean on your foundation when the clock gets tight. It's the only way to keep the water out.
You know, as we wrap up this analysis, think deeply about that #1 pick race between Pittsburgh and LA. It creates a perverse incentive structure where structural failure is actually rewarded with the most valuable asset in the sport.
It's a weird system.
It really is. As you go about your day, look at the ecosystems around you. How many systems in our society, in our businesses, or in our education models secretly reward failure just to ensure a false sense of competitive balance the next year?
Wow.
What would happen to the quality of the product if we fundamentally changed the rules and forced the absolute worst performers to fight for survival rather than gifting them the top prize?
That concept is going to completely change how I view the bottom of every standings page from now on. Thank you so much for providing such incredibly rich source material and research. Distilling these underlying mechanisms was a blast, and I'm already looking forward to diving into the next stack of notes you send our way. Well,